16 million colors. Wreak some havoc in your head. Welcome to Titancast, your home for news, commentary, personal stories, and more. My name is Samuel, the Southern Sega Gentleman. With me today, hailing from across the pond in beautiful Portugal, Nebuchadnezzar, one of the original crew members, Nuno. So, Nuno, how's it going today, brother?
Great, man. Sunny day, actually. It's getting really cold. The weather is getting really, really cold. Winter has kind of started overnight, but it's actually a sunny afternoon right now. So all's good.
Good deal, man. So, you kind of missed out with the first podcast we put out. You were just getting back into the community, and you've already dropped down an episode for review on YouTube. And from what I hear, you're working on another video as well that's soon to be dropping, or might have already dropped by the time this podcast goes live. But we kind of wanted to bring you back in and let the community, let the audience know who you were as a creator, your story, and very much like we did in the first episode, how you got involved with Saturn, how you got involved with the Sega Saturn community, the Saturn Junkyard in particular, and how you came back to us now. Because from my knowledge and for everybody else, spoiler alert, you were with the Saturn Junkyard to begin with in its early days. So I figured that instead of me recapping entirely everything I've already said in the first episode, which everybody can go listen to, I just kind of hand it off to you and let you tell us a little bit about, how you first started off with Saturn.
Sure. By the way, just to begin with, I just wanted to bring this up that, as you said, I'm Portuguese, and I'm the only one from the Saturn Junkyard team who's not a native English speaker. So just bear with me. I know my accent needs improvement, and sometimes I completely destroy expressions, mix them up, and I have to pause to think of the words I want to use and all that stuff. So it's not terrible. I think you can all understand what I'm saying. It's just that I know it's going to sound a bit off since you're already used to all the good folks that are either British or American. So I'm just a Latino to spice things up. And getting into the topic at hand. So you asked me how I first got into Saturn. Well, like most of us, I think I got into Saturn as a kid. I got it as a Christmas present in 1996, if I'm not mistaken, when I was 7 years old. I was born in 89, so if you want to know my age, you just add one number to the year you're in. So in 96, I was 7. And it was actually, I felt like it was already a bit late to get a console. I've been wanting a console for so long in this case being just a couple of years, since I was 5 or 6. But when you're a kid, 1 year is like a lifetime, and all of my friends already had consoles way before me. And I was like, man, I really want to get a console. Mom, Dad, please buy me a console for Christmas. Is it this year finally that I'm going to get a console? And just to give you a bit of the context, how the gaming landscape was in Portugal at the time, unlike the US, Nintendo was really small here. I mean, Nintendo almost didn't exist. The only successful Nintendo console during the whole 90s was the Game Boy. The Game Boy was really successful, but otherwise we practically didn't have NES, SNES. I had only one friend who had a Nintendo 64. So it was really all about Sega. Sega completely ruled the market. I had a friend with a Master System. I had many friends with Mega Drives. So I was already very familiar with Sega as a brand. And then my parents took me to the store to buy a console. Yeah, it wasn't actually a surprise. They took me with them. And the guy there, even though the PlayStation, I think, was already selling by then. Actually, I don't know, in 96. I hope I'm not mixing that. I think the PlayStation was already out. But the clerk, for whatever reason, sold them a Saturn. Keep in mind, we didn't know anything about consoles at the time. I was just a little kid. My parents weren't into technology. So the clerk, for whatever reason, decided to sell them a Saturn. And if he didn't, I probably wouldn't be here today. I mean, that's really the truth. I mean, probably I wouldn't be here right now. So thanks, man, whoever you are. And actually, I still remember the very first game I played on the system, which was Christmas Nights. While the guy was at the counter selling the console to my parents, I was playing on a kiosk, which was running Christmas Nights. And it will always be a very special game for me because it was literally my first time playing a game on Sega Saturn. And I got it actually. It was packed in with the console. And so that was it. My very first console ever was the Sega Saturn. And unfortunately at the time, my parents, we weren't very well off, so buying the console itself was already kind of a financial burden for them. So they never actually bought me any games. I just had the games that came built in, which are very good, by the way. Besides Christmas Nights, there was Virtua Fighter 1, Virtua Fighter Kids, and a bunch of demo CDs. Thank God for demo CDs. It's like, if it weren't for demo CDs, I wouldn't have had the chance to play so many games that I could because of them. And fortunately, I had a godfather with whom I had a really great relationship, and he bought me some games afterwards, including awesome stuff like Virtual On, which I loved as a kid. And one of my very favorite games for the Saturn, which you'll never guess what it is. Does Dragonheart ring a bell?
Oh, Jesus.
What? Tell me.
No. You good, man? You good, man? Go ahead.
I know it's okay. It's a tie-in from the movie with the same title, and it's a platformer with some an action game. I mean, a side-scrolling action game with some platforming elements. But it was fantasy, medieval fantasy with dragons, and like, I was a kid, man. I didn't have many games. And then suddenly you gave me a game with dragons in it, and a knight, and medieval towns and forests and whatever. How could I not love that game to death? I mean, really, to this day, I freaking love that game.
About like me in SimCity, man.
Moving on. So, yeah, that lasted maybe a couple of years or so before I kind of lost interest, because once again, you have to put this into context. Nowadays, I'm 28 years old, and 2 years is like nothing. Like, time flies, and you keep your hobbies for a very long time. Back then, when you're a kid, 2 years is a long time. It was more than enough for me to kind of simply get tired of the system. You know, I had very few games, and I had other interests. I was still constantly being exposed to new things. Like, remember when you were a kid? You know, it's hard to keep interested in the same thing for very long because you're constantly seeing new things and getting exposed to new things. And I kind of, at some point, I kind of stopped caring about Saturn. And so I did.
It was the exact same thing for us. I mean, you know, whenever we were talking about it on the first podcast,
which whenever
it came, yeah, right. So whenever it came to us over here in the States, at least, you know, by the time I picked up a Saturn in '97, I mean, it was only 2 years later the Dreamcast dropped. And like you were just saying, as a kid, you know, you have that, you know, the years seem long, at least. You know, I know, growing up and everything, the years seem to fly by. But
well, in my defense, unlike you traitors, I actually, after the Saturn, I got Dreamcast. I didn't get a PlayStation 2.
No, hold on.
Afterwards, after the Dreamcast discontinued, okay?
Hold on. I have a Dreamcast. I didn't get a PlayStation 2 until 2001, thank you. I had 2.5 real good years with the Dreamcast.
Okay, maybe I'm confusing with some of the other guys. Maybe I'm mixing you up.
Yeah. No, I'm a Southern Sega gentleman, man. I stick to my roots.
I clearly remember someone saying that they bought a PlayStation after the Saturn and before the Dreamcast. Maybe it was Simon.
That was probably Simon.
Oh my God, it's going to kill me. But yeah, so I stopped caring about the Saturn, and eventually I got the Dreamcast. One thing wasn't related to the other. I actually stopped caring about Saturn a bit before I got interested in the Dreamcast. But anyway, I actually sold it. I sold my Saturn to a friend for next to nothing, because at the time I was like, I don't care. I didn't have any idea about what the value of things were, especially second-hand things. So I figured that if the console didn't have any interest, any value to me, it wouldn't have much value to anyone else. So I sold it to him for like, I don't know, 10 euros or something like that, which is ridiculous because at the time I think they were still going for 50 euros or more second hand. So I sold it to him more as a favor and just to get rid of something that I wasn't interested in. But at least I didn't sell my games. And I thank myself every day for this. I never actually sold my games. And I still have every single one of them, with the exception of Christmas Nights, which it's very sad to say this, but I actually lost it. We moved houses. We moved houses at some point, and I lost. I probably had the box games in like one box and the sleeve games in another, because Christmas Nights in Europe came in a sleeve. And I also lost my demo CDs, which also came in sleeves. So that was probably it. I lost my demo CDs, which I have since bought again. I actually found a guy online selling demo CDs, and they were so special to me that I actually bought them again. Christmas Nights, I actually own Christmas Nights Japanese version that Simon gifted me, actually, many years ago, which, thank you very much, Simon, once again, because I love Christmas Nights to death. But all of the other games I actually own the very same games that I had as a kid. So, yeah, props to me.
All right, man. So, very much like the rest of us, you went through the Saturn, not necessarily at its beginning. In fact, you and me are the exact same age, so that's awesome. So whenever you faded away from that, Dreamcast came, PlayStation came, all this other stuff was happening. At some point, you and Simon linked up on the early days of the interwebs, at least the early days for social networking, I suppose, in the mid-2000s or so. So, at what point did you finally come in contact with Simon in the early days of the Junkyard?
Well, actually, it's kind of related to how I got back into the Saturn to begin with, and that's related to how I got back into the Dreamcast. So it was like I got my Dreamcast, and eventually, it died off. It got really hard to buy games. So once again, I sold it to a friend for next to nothing. Some years later, so I was probably 14 or 15 when I had this really good friend. And for whatever reason, he got into the Dreamcast. Like some 4 or 5 years after the demise of the Dreamcast, he got into it. And he got access to many burned CDs, which I didn't have back when I first had the console. So suddenly we had this huge library opened up to us. And when he got his Dreamcast and I started going to his house and playing on his Dreamcast, I immediately decided that I had to get one for me as well. I had to get back on the Dreamcast. And for whatever reason, which I can't remember very well because it's been so long, I eventually got back into the Saturn as well. And that was just a personal thing that my friend didn't. But I got back in. I felt this, I don't know if it was already nostalgia, even though not many years have passed, or if it was just, I don't know, for whatever reason, I got back into the Saturn. I got interested in it. I bought a second-hand console. I replayed all my games. I got new games. And, that's it. I got into the Saturn again, around when I was maybe 15 or going up to 16, a bit after I first got into the Dreamcast. And because of the Dreamcast, I got into the Dreamcast Junkyard, which is not a coincidence that it shares a name with the Saturn Junkyard. The Dreamcast, which I guess most of our listeners will know, was a blog dedicated to the Dreamcast, founded by Tom Lee, if I'm not mistaken. And Me and Simon met there because we were both frequent readers, and we would comment on the posts and we would read each other's comments. And I don't know, eventually we both got into the team and actually wrote articles for the Dreamcast Junkyard. I can't remember if Simon was already a member of the team when I first saw him, or if he was still just a reader like me. Anyway, at some point he decided to, because he really liked the Saturn, he decided to make the Saturn Junkyard. So, which makes sense, right? I mean, we were both reading the Dreamcast Junkyard. We really liked the Dreamcast Junkyard, and they kind of thought, well, I also like the Saturn, and there's just no equivalent, no community, no blog about the Saturn that we could get behind, you know? So yeah, he went ahead, he made the Saturn Junkyard, and he was all by himself. You can kind of consider them sister projects, you know, even though they're made by different people. And I started reading Saturn Junkyard. And it was also because I can't really remember how much we interacted back then. But I really, I don't know what's the expression. It's kind of weird to say this, but I liked him, and it's probably going to sound wrong.
Oh my God.
It's like, well, you know.
No. I mean,
people, sometimes you immediately get this connection to someone that you just met, you know. You meet a lot of people, some you like a bit, some you don't like much, and some people you kind of just connect, you know. You feel like, wow, this guy is awesome. I like talking to this guy, and you know, and it was something like that. I really liked talking with Simon. So, yeah, when he started the Saturn Junkyard, I immediately became a frequent reader. And it was just him by himself. And at some point, I don't really remember how it started. Oh, I wrote a review. That's how it started. I was playing the game, Steep Slope Sliders, which you're going to talk about in another podcast.
Your very first introduction.
That was it. So I was playing I was kind of just trying to remember. I actually remember that very well. I was just trying to remember the context in which it all happened. So I was playing this game, and I got really into it. Oh, just to give another bit of context, I was already familiar with writing about games, because there was a really big website in Portugal at the time about games in general, kind of like GameSpot or IGN or something like that, which was called PT Gamers, appropriately, because it was a Portuguese website. And I was actually part of the team, kind of. I mean, it was a professional website. The core team worked there full-time, and I was kind of a part-time collaborator, you know, kind of freelance. And I occasionally wrote reviews and stuff like that for that site. So I was already comfortable in writing about games. And I was passionate about it, you know. I was already part of a project about games. So I was playing that game, and I was getting really into it. And, you know, when you sometimes feel like you like something so much that you feel this need to create something around that, you know. And at the time, what I was mostly familiar with was creating text content around the game. In this case, a review. So I wrote this review without even asking, like, would you be interested that I wrote this or something like that? No, I just went ahead and I wrote the review, and I was like, if he likes it, he likes it. If he doesn't like it, well, whatever. I wanted to write this anyway. And I sent it to him like, hey man, I wrote this review. Do you want to publish it on the site or whatever? And he was like, man, this is really great. Do you want to be part of the team? I was like, yeah, I do want to be part of the team and write more stuff for the Junkyard. And that was basically it. And in the beginning, it was just two of us pumping out articles for the yard. And I had very limited equipment at the time, so nowadays I'm making video content and stuff like that. Back then it was just written articles because it was the only thing that I could do. And that was it. It was just another project in my in my long list of projects related to games. And me and Simon became really, really good friends, so much so that even after we kind of stopped publishing stuff on the yard, we always kept in touch. first through emails and then through Facebook. So we always kept getting in touch with one another, and which also helped me coming back nowadays because for all intents and purposes we were friends, even though we live in different countries and had never actually met in person. We were friends, so that kind of gave me a personal link to the project.
So with everything that happened with the junkyard, eventually it fell out. You and me had talked earlier before we started recording about how everybody kind of just went their separate ways, and I was wanting you to kind of elaborate on that. So, could you give us a little background on how the junkyard kind of faded out, and then how you came back into it?
Sure. So I can only speak from my perspective. It's important to state this because everyone else will have had their reasons and their personal motives and their personal story, their personal relationship with the project. So I can only speak for myself, and it's been a while. So as I mentioned when I first published my first article, which was my first article since I returned, I mentioned that my previous post on the blog was dated from January 1st, 2013. So 4 years ago, and it actually wasn't really a decent post at all. It was just me talking something because I kind of didn't want to let the project die, but at the same time didn't have much to contribute. So it's been a while, and my life has taken many turns since then, so my memory is a bit fuzzy. But for me, I kind of just lost interest. It sounds bad to say this, like I didn't care about it, which is far from true. I never stopped thinking about the art from time to time. Sometimes it would come to my mind, and I would be like, man, I should really write something for the blog. Maybe that'll give some motivation to the rest of the guys, and we could all get together and start making content for it again. So I never completely forgot about the project, never completely stopped caring about it. But it's just life gets in the way. You have your personal things, you have stuff in terms of jobs, in terms of relationships, in terms of your own personal growth. You try new things, your life changes, and it's hard to even though we kind of this happened and we kind of abandoned the project, it still lasted a long time when you think about it. I mean, Simon created Junkyard in 2006, and we had posts up until 2014 or even 15. I actually not entirely sure, because in the meantime we got other members like Arugulas and others whose name I can't remember right now. It's a bit embarrassing. But we had other team members who kind of kept the project alive even after me and Simon stopped. So it still lasted a long time. I mean, almost 10 years with, or at least 6, 7, 8 years with regular content. It's still a long time on the internet if you really think about it.
Oh, yeah, especially nowadays whenever most things are, if it's hot, it's hot, and otherwise in about a year time you won't even remember about it.
Yeah, so even though we kind of abandoned it, it's still, we shouldn't forget that it still lasted for a long time, and I think that's reason to be proud. And it shows our dedication to the project. Throughout all those years, we kept going at it. So eventually there's really no other way of saying this. It just life gets in the way, your priorities change, your interests change, and you let it go.
So with everything that happened, and everything falling out of favor and everything, here in 2017, the junkyard was not alive. I mean, it was there, it existed, but like you said, there was very little content being produced. And here in 2017, Simon, John, and I think it was just Simon and John for the most part, and John was the one who really was pushing it, at least my understanding of that.
That's right.
So whenever John brought everything back, and he got Simon back on board, and they created the Facebook group, and were you one of the? I know that I was one of the first people that come in. So were you also one of the first group in that first 100, or did you come after the fact?
By the way, before I answer your question, I just wanted to point out that we may have had a somewhat small readership by today's standards, especially, but we still had some really dedicated readers. If you go back and you read the comments on the last few posts from 2013, 14, 15, you see people coming back and saying stuff like, "Oh man, this site is awesome! I just found it," and are you going to keep writing new articles or not? In the meantime, I'm going to read the articles that have already been published, or guys that have followed us for longer saying, "Whoa, what's happened to the website? I mean, are you guys all right? Are you going to keep writing? The site is awesome, and I really like your stuff." So we had a really dedicated membership, and I actually, when I read these comments, I kind of feel like we let those people down, and I would love to have them back. I actually went back to those comments and tried to find those people online, to find an email or something like that, just to say, "Hey man, guys, we got the website together. Please come back." We're back on this show, and they're gone. Most of them, I think. I don't think they're coming back, which is sad, because I really wanted to let those people know that I read those comments. And I would really like to have them reading us again. But to answer your question, so when Simon got back into it, and as you said, it was John Lee who mostly got him insisted to make him come back and bring the project back. So he shot me a message on Facebook. As I've said, throughout this time we were on Facebook and we would talk occasionally. And so he sent me a message saying, "Hey man, we're bringing the Saturn Junkyard back together. So want to join in on fun?" So yeah, Simon sent me that message, and I was like, at the time I was kind of at a really bad place personally, and I said, on one hand I got really happy for him and for the project, because as I said, throughout the years, in the back of my mind I always had this nagging thought about how we dropped the project and how we should really bring it back, because it was a good thing that we had going, and it was a worthy thing. The Saturn is still an amazing console. There is still people interested in Saturn, and there really was no good reason for us to not bring the project back. So I was really happy, but at the same time I said, "Hey man, my personal life is kind of a mess right now," and it kind of still is. But so I'm really happy for you, and I hope it really is a success. And I want to just know that I will be back onto the project. I mean, don't worry about that. I will get back into the project. I just can't give you a date, because right now I'm not in a good mind set to really get back on it. But I eventually did. Sometimes I would write a few lines for an article. I would get some idea about something that I wanted to do, and eventually they're starting to come to fruition. I wrote that article about gamepads. I shot the video to accompany it. I have since made a video review, and I want to keep going.
I know at least for me, dude, we really appreciate everything you do, man. I've gone back and read the articles you put up on the Junkyard originally, and I enjoyed them. I know I've enjoyed all the videos you produced. You bring another flavor to the crew, and that's something we need. Because just left to three people eventually will stagnate. I mean, that's just the truth. You always have to have new ideas coming in. And, the back and forth that we've had just today before we started recording, I mean, it just works, man. I really enjoy speaking with you. I really enjoy conversating with you. And I really enjoy what you bring not only to the podcast group, to the creative side of the Junkyard, but also to the community. So I think we'll call it good on that one, brother. I really appreciate you coming out and letting everybody know a little bit about yourself, letting everybody kind of get inside the head of Nuno.
You messed it up again.
I messed his name up 1,000 times. I swear. To me, it's Nuno.
Don't worry.
Apparently,
I really don't take
Nuno. No. This is great, man. Because I get to tell everybody how hard it is for me to pronounce your name. But, one thing we do want to do is, if you manage to get this far up in the podcast, we really appreciate it. Like we've said before, y'all are the reason we do this. The listeners are the reason we do this. We like to engage the community, and we really like for y'all to engage back. So with all that being said, Nuno, I appreciate you coming on out, brother. Hope to see some more stuff coming out of you. And hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast on a regular basis, because I know that, everybody else gets burned out too. So
that's true.
So from everybody here at the Junkyard, this is us signing off.
Bye.